El Mandingo, written by Francisco Asís, read to you by Liza Perez. I heard this story from a friend who heard it from one of her best friends, who said it happened to her uncle in a trip through the desert. I don't know if this story is real. I hope not. Or maybe I do. I really don't know. But I'm writing about it because I want everyone in this world to be careful with what they wish. Some wishes can come true in this desert. Some names were deliberately changed to protect the identity of those who were involved in the story. Nobody in his right mind would want to be related to it, I think. Uncle Vinny had a folk band, a great folk band. They were really famous in this part of Chile, so they had to move from one city to another because of their demanding concerts schedule. And the distance between cities is bigger than any other part of the country. They had to travel through the desert in a van for 8 hours from Copiapó to Antofagasta. The trip was exhausting, and Uncle Vinny had the worst week of his life. He was a 40-year-old musician, and as a musician, Vinny had some bad habits that are seen in every woman and man who have the same occupation. These habits caused Vinny to lose his family. His wife took their kids and ran away to an unknown place. That made Vinny so sad and depressed for what was happening in his life. His teardrop was a waterfall. The night was falling in the desert, and at the van, Vinny was venting with all his emotion with the boys of the band, who were the biggest friends that he had ever had. He was looking at his phone at photos of his family while he was telling them about his regrets. He said, "I really miss my family, my kids, but above all, I need my wife." "But what would you do to have her back?" some guy of the band asked. "I would give everything to have her back," Vinny replied. In that very moment, they realized that something happened to the van. The vehicle had a flat tire, so they had to get out of the van to replace it. They stopped in Aguas Verdes, a small place where truck drivers usually stopped to rest from the long trip that the desert only makes worse. There were no lights in that place, so the band used their phones as flashlights, helping them to change the flat tire. It was pretty easy work for a 45-year-old guys. After that, they completed their journey without any complications. A few hours later, the gig was great. They rocked. But Vinny was still extremely sad and decided to call his wife to tell her about his sorrows. He looked for his phone, but it wasn't with him, so he started to freak out. He needed it. It had all the photos of his family. Vinny tried to remember when the last time that he used his phone was. "Aguas Verdes," he exclaimed. "I used the phone when we replaced the flat tire in Aguas Verdes." Vinny wanted to recover the phone as soon as possible, so he decided to drive back to Aguas Verdes. He didn't ask his friend for help because they were tired. It was a long trip and a big concert, so Vinny drove back for his phone alone. The heavy-hearted man drove fast, thinking about what he was losing because of his stupid behavior. He didn't want to commit another mistake, so he decided to find his phone and change his path. After several minutes, he finally arrived. Vinny placed the van in a way that the lights of the vehicle could help him to find his phone, and it worked. He immediately saw it, and it was the happiest moment he had in a long time. He ran for it and bent over. Vinny took the phone, removed the dust of it, and when he was raising his head, he saw a man. It seemed to be a pair of shoes. Vinny looked up and saw a big, creepy shadow. "I think you asked for me a few hours ago," the shadow said. What? Vinny said while a shiver crossed down his spine. Do you want to have your wife back, don't you? Vinny fell to the floor paralyzed. After a couple of seconds, he turned back and started to run. When he got into the van, the shadow said, You know where you can find me, Vinny. I will always be here for you. I would like to know what happens with Vinny, but the story ended there. I suppose that he is alive because how can we know about this story if he wasn't? Anyways, I have heard similar stories of Aguas Verdes and the Mandingo several times. Mandingo is how truck drivers called the devil. He appeared a lot in the desert. Many truck drivers and people like Vinny have been cheated by him, and they have been cheated by the desert too. This story may vary every time I have heard it from a different person, but there is a thing that has never varied in the entire story, that the desert might be a dangerous place.